Good evening, everyone. Thank you. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Steve Cochran. I have the privilege of serving as the superintendent of the Princeton Public Schools, and I have the privilege tonight of welcoming all of you to this session on raising healthy kids. Maybe you could do me a favor. If you could just turn to someone next to you you don't know or behind you, just quickly introduce yourself. Me in that. We have people here tonight from all of our schools, from the elementary school, from the middle school, from the high school. We have families represented tonight from the charter school, from some of our private schools, and from towns even outside of Princeton. And we're here because we care about our kids. But I almost feel like, as adults, we need to begin tonight with sort of this collective deep breath, and then let it out. Because there is a lot going on in the world. This has not been an easy year to begin. And for us, I think back to events in Charlottesville in August. We had Las Vegas, we had the shooting in Texas, we had the shooting in California at an elementary school. We have experienced violence and hate around the world, and we have experienced hate and heartache and tragedy here close to home, in our own town and our own schools. And for us as adults, it's hard. I've stopped watching CNN, and for our kids, they're exposed to that same wave that comes through the media of pain and hate and violence. And then they have added pressures of homework and of lack of sleep and of stress over relationships and social media and just the desire to do well in all their work. So our kids are under pressure. We know that. There is an epidemic in our country of depression among students. And yet we're here tonight to find ways to not just protect them from all that's out there in the world, but to empower them to be able to stand up against it and to find their way through it and to lead lives of joy and purpose. It's not an easy challenge, but it's why I'm so glad that we have so many people here tonight and that we're attempting to do this work together and to talk about it together. And here tonight to lead us through a conversation on how to raise healthy, resilient kids is George Scott. And I have this whole written introduction about George, which is back there. I can tell you a few things. I can tell you he spent 30 years as a special education educator in New Jersey, that he was the director of the Mercer County Commission of Traumatic Loss. I believe he was the director of the State Commission of Traumatic Loss. He is a marriage and family therapist with an office located in Ewing. But most of all, George is a friend. He is a wise and caring counsel. He has helped our school district in times of need in the past. He has been with us, for us, most recently in the tragedy that we faced at the beginning of this year. He's been a support for me, for our administrative team, for Mr. Snyder, I know, who's in the back, for Christina Donovan, who is our supervisor of guidance, who's here tonight. for our staff and for our kids. And I'm really glad that he can be that support, that friend, that counsel for some of our parents here tonight. So please join me in welcoming Mr. George Scott.
You're waiting for me to start. Make you a little uncomfortable. Hey, listen, have you ever been in your life, either personally or professionally, did you ever get to a point where the direction of your life changed? Something happened, you met someone, there was an event, and all of a sudden, on the other end of that experience, you were different. You didn't invite it, you didn't expect it, but you realize that, wow, coming on the other side of that. Well, that happened to me, and I'm going to use that as kind of the starting point, because what I'm going to tell you actually brought me here tonight. So how about that? It was in the spring of 2013, so we're talking 4.5 years ago. At the time, in addition to some of the other things that I was doing, I was the coordinator for the Middlesex and Monmouth Traumatic Loss Coalition. And this is a Monmouth County story that on a Sunday evening, I got a call from the superintendent of whether or not we could, the Traumatic Loss Coalition, could respond to the district and help their crisis team. Now, that event didn't change my life. Let me digress for just a second. Every county in New Jersey has a Traumatic Loss Coalition. We're funded through DCF, the Division of Children and Families. The money comes through Rutgers University, and every county has a coordinator for the equivalent of a day a week. And I was that person in the spring of 2013. So when Bernie Reagan called me, Bernie is the superintendent down in Hazlet, when he called me that Sunday night to come and respond to the tragedy in his district, of course I went. Made some phone calls. The response team and I arrived early the next morning, and we proceeded to do the work that we do to support a district who was struggling with tragedy. Not my first response, not the first time I had ever been on a response that was because of the sudden suicide death of a student, not my first time. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. But it changed me for some reason, and here's the question I pose to you. Moms and dads in the audience, foster parents, step-parents, professional educators, whatever hat you wear. You coach teams in the community, you're in Scouts, you're involved in the lives of kids. And here's the question that haunted me and took my whole career in a different direction. And that question is this: how is it possible, with who we are and where we live, how is it possible that between birth and 13, one of our babies gets to the point where they can't figure out how to live anymore? In short 13 years. How's that possible? How is it possible that we see and we watch our kids get into situations in their lives where we think, this is not the plan. This is not what we anticipated. This is not what we expected. This is not what we worked for. But we find that our kids, some of our kids, are struggling. So we're going to talk about that struggle for a little bit. Because I want to tell you that we, you and I, as moms and dads and other significant adults in the lives of kids, we do not have to be victim to a culture that really has such negative and profound influence on our children. We do not. But I also know that some of the comments that I'm going to make, it may make you uncomfortable as a mom or a dad. I'm not going to apologize for that. Because you're not here for feel good, you're here for how do I raise my kids healthy? How do I keep them doing well? And if it doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply to you, but I want to touch base on it because many times the culture and the negative influences are right inside of the home and the family and the nest. And sometimes we're not even aware of it or know what to do about it. So what we want to do is we want to take a step back and kind of the comfort of the auditorium. Our kids are somewhere being taken care of. You hope they're doing their homework. You hope they're getting in bed on time. I know what you're hoping. You're already on your phone saying, are you sure your homework is done? I know it. I sit with parents all the time. You guys are terrible. It's like you stalk your children about stuff like homework. But you love them. And you want them to do well. How do we raise healthy kids? Let's start here. There's a picture, and there's a picture, and there, and there. Wow. See, that was the beginning, right? For some of you who are saying, God, my kids are old enough now, I can't even remember the beginning really clearly. Well, yes, you can, because they were remarkable change of life moments. And I bet the next thing I'm going to say, I can rely on the truthfulness of this 100%. See, I'm not usually willing to take a risk with a big audience like this, particularly in Princeton, where you guys like to debate and argue stuff. I don't usually like to go out on a limb and say dicey kinds of things, but I'm going to tell you this. When you were in the delivery room and that baby of yours was born, and that baby was put on mom, and if you were fortunate enough that Dad was present and Dad huddles close by, I can tell you what never happens. Never do that mom and dad look down at that baby and look at each other and look down at that baby and say, sweetheart, I wonder how we can screw this one up. That never happens. So therefore, what I'm saying to you is regardless of your struggles right now, it didn't start out that way. You started out with hopes and dreams for those babies. And now maybe you worry. And now maybe you worry a bit more than you want to worry. But you worry about stop worrying because who's going to pay attention to your kids? So what did you notice? What did you notice? What did you notice? Take another look. Take a look at that. And take a look at that. And that. And that. This is the only test you'll have to answer if you want. I know I didn't give you advance notice so you didn't have time to prep, but what did you notice in those pictures? You got these smiles. What we call them is face gazing. That is critically important for the well-being of that baby, because when that baby and that mom, or that baby and that dad are face gazing, it is starting to change in a positive way the neurology of that baby and how that baby navigates the world. Believe it or not, just a gaze, eye gazing. There was another piece that you saw too. Gentle, safe touches. Human babies need to be attached. Now some of you are saying, come on, get on with the raising healthy kids thing. My kids are way beyond this. Well, maybe some of you are still going to have babies. Or maybe your babies will have babies. And I want you to know what the environment needs to be like in order for these babies to optimize the naturalness of the birth process and the neurology and the biology and how it affects how well they do in school and how well they do in life. Because the tone and the atmosphere that you create with the power of being a mom or a dad, what you create has an effect on that neurology and biology, and those still pictures don't show the firing and wiring that's going on in their brains. But it is. And this gaze is critically important. Now, I'm going to bring something up now, and probably it's going to touch some of you. See, that love gaze, that dreamy gaze is really critically important to the well-being of those kids. But what happens happens when you're under stress is that loving gaze turns into what researchers call a yuck face. That's the face you all have when you're frustrated with your children and they look at your face and say, "What? I didn't do anything?" Because they can tell it's right here. It's a face that shows disappointment. It's a face that shows frustration and sometimes for kids, rejection. So how we continue our face gazes with our children is critically important, and let me tell you why. Because now I'm going to jump over to the classroom. Because if a child as a student enters a classroom and they've had not so much of a love gaze, safe touch, if they've grown up in a more stressful, highly toxic environment, then when they enter the classroom, they're going to be hypervigilant, looking for danger. They're going to be looking for who they can't trust. Because if children grow up in homes and neighborhoods where there is no trust of the adults for a variety of reasons, they will not trust adults easily, including teachers. And let me tell you a story that's going to demonstrate that. Imagine you are going for a walk in the woods. It's a beautiful fall day, the sun is shining, you're walking. And imagine that as you go down this path, at the other end, out of the woods comes a bear. You stop, and something happens in here. Without even thinking about it, your safety system, your survival system kicks into gear, and a couple of neurobiological things happen. Is number one, you start to breathe deeper because you want oxygen in your blood. Blood starts rushing to your big muscles so that you can run away. You get tunnel vision so you can see clearly, and you're looking and scanning for exits. Because if your system didn't do that, we would have been snuffed out thousands of years ago when the saber-toothed tiger attacked our ancestors from far behind. So your system automatically, and you run or you fight. If you have your children with you, you fight or you run to survive. And when you get away from the danger, what happens is your system calms down again. That was scary. Heart rate drops, blood pressure drops, everything gets back to normal. But that being confronted by danger for some of our children, because I asked this question, what if the child comes home from school and the bear lives in the house? What if the bear is dad? What if the bear is dad with a wicked temper or addiction or just an irritable kind of guy? Or it's a grandfather or a grandmother or an aunt. It's somebody in the circle of that kid. The bear is always there, therefore their system is always on alert. And when your system is always on alert, you're looking for danger, and when you find it, you will either fight it. Sometimes we do that verbally. Please excuse the language that I'm going to use, but some of you have been experiencing this language with your kids. So some of our kids grow up with that fear response, and when they're confronted with danger or perceived danger, they get out of my face. Oh, aggressive. Because they want to clear away the danger. Or they're going to run. Or they're going to hide up in their bedrooms. Because when our system gets primed, because the energy is toxic, their system is only prone to help survival. And this part of the brain that you want your kids to maximize here in the Princeton schools or wherever your children go to school, this prefrontal cortex, this wonderful part of us being human, it gets used less and less because survival is more and more. Soft, gentle touches, face gazing. Smiles and laughter. Sometimes there's not enough of that going around. You guys aren't bad, though. You know, earlier, whatever I said, you laughed. That was really good. Some of you laughed. Some of you still have that yuck face. And I will get at you before you leave this evening. Smiles and laughter. They create healthy brains, so our conversation had its beginning long before this evening. Here's the good news. Oh, by the way, let me ask, when your baby was born, how many of you walked home with a manual from the hospital how to raise this one? Promised myself I was going to write that manual. So therefore, what do you rely on? You rely on instinct. You rely on history. This is how my mom and dad did it. Oh, I'm not doing it the way my mom and dad did it. Because it's really difficult. It's hard work to be a mom or a dad. Hard work. And that doesn't even consider the external pressures that you felt when that baby was born, or the external pressures that you have in your life, in your family now. So let's look at the moment. It's never too late to make an adjustment. That's the good news. The good news is, even if you feel like, oh man, that was me, I was the bear, I am the bear. Good news is, that can change. You only need to have intent, desire, and commitment. Because that can change. We have complicated lives. And sometimes we miss out on this stuff. We don't do enough laughing and hugging and funning. Quite honestly, for most of our families, at least in the Northeast, we've forgotten how to play. Oh, don't get me wrong. Kids are playing video games all the time. You know that, right? That's not what I'm talking about. That doesn't count. That doesn't even count if it's your video games you're playing. That's not play. Play is that. Play is where it's just us. It's where you knit the family back together again. It's where you can laugh together. And in the moment, you don't even know it. You're creating memories. And that's the glue that holds our children together. Is knowing where the nest is, and knowing who's in the nest, and they have a safe place to go home to. Really important. We know we can't continue to push ahead. We can't continue to do this, folks. We just can't. You know, Steve mentioned that. I don't use the word crazy easily. Pejoratively, it's a crazy time. Let me tag on something that he said, because it was research that was done a year ago. There is a group called the Southern Poverty Law Center. Some of you know that group. Creates a magazine called Teaching Tolerance. If you've ever seen the magazine and you know that it's about how do we build respect among people. That's really been their work. It's been their work since the 60s. Over a year ago, year and a half ago now, maybe even 2 years ago, they had a premise from the research team, and they said this: we wonder whether or not the political rhetoric in our country has a negative effect on our children. That was the premise. Whether or not children just being exposed to words and attitudes are negatively affected by that. And when they did the research anecdotally across the country, they found yes in very big ways. Either because our children were exposed directly to the rhetoric, or because our kids were in the presence of adults who were talking about the rhetoric. And then that doesn't even include whether or not, regardless of your political persuasion or political stance. I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is, do we create toxic environments in which our kids inhale that, and therefore it sets them on a negative trajectory? That's what I'm interested in. Because our kids become who we are. That's a follow-up to that statement from the superintendent. I like using the word well-being, being well. One of the things I like is that has, for at least a year now, I'd have to check it out with Gary, because Gary and I have talked about this, but for at least a year, and probably longer, the district has had a focus on well-being. A wellness committee to take a look at how do we keep not only our kids healthy and well, but the community. Is there anything we can do there? And what about the staff, right? What about their wellness? So what we know is when we have well-being, and we'll talk about what it looks like and how you get there. When we have well-being, boy, we are optimally performing and connecting and consulting and working together. When we feel safe and when we feel well. It goes across generations. What I'm telling you tonight does not have any specific reference to your nationality, your age, your culture, your ethnicity, because babies across the world all respond to this in the same way based upon the environments in which they're raised. All of our kids are affected. We know that stresses of life sometimes become toxic stresses. Toxic is there as like big and bold because stress in and of itself is not bad. Stress is what builds resiliency. When we're able to tolerate stress, in fact, in the research it's called distress tolerance. And many of your kids, I don't even know your children, many of your kids do not have a measure of tolerance when the stress goes up. To be able to roll up their sleeves and try again. To get a bad grade and say, I'll do better next time. To be able to pitch in and help. To be able to persevere. Resiliency. It's a critical attribute for we as human beings. And the more resiliency we have, the more this fires better, and the more we do relationships better, because we're not put down by them. They don't burden us, because we're resilient. But it doesn't have to be that way. So this is really what we're talking about, right? This is really the beginning of it. Interesting concepts. Feeling connected. Remember I talked about attachment. Attachment still matters now. I'm going to tell you this. It's later in the slides, but I'm going to tell you this. The research says that hugs are very important to each other and to our children. And here's what the research says. In order to have a full effect of the hug, it's got to be 20 seconds. If it's 25 seconds, you're creepy, and it's a creepy hug. So let's not be lingering in the hallway on these hugs saying, the guy in there said I could, because I'm going to put 20 seconds on my watch. Because now it's a tap, tap. We're out of that. There's no attachment. Right? And there's nothing wrong with what I'm going to tell you, but hug is better than a fist bump. Not a lot of contact there on a fist bump. Yes, it's safer, and here's the dilemma. And the schools face this dilemma. And because I'm not formally a part of the school, I can be a little heretical and be out here on the edge and say this. Some of our children just need a safe touch. They need to be comforted. Kids can't comfort themselves very well unless they know that, hey, come here with me. You're going to be fine. In fact, some kids, talk to the teachers in your school. Some kids need it so badly that they'll come and they'll wrap their arms around the teacher's leg or they'll grab hold of a teacher's skirt or a male teacher's pants. They want connection. So what we have to figure out is we've gone from hug your kids to don't touch your kids, which makes them out of touch. Makes you out of touch. And listen to the implications of the words. You're out of touch. How do we go from hug your kids, don't touch your kids? Can we bring that back in here somewhere where our kids, when they need it, can get the hug? Now here's what you cannot do. You cannot go home and start hugging your children, because that will freak them out. They will not know what you're doing. Hugs are really important. Feeling connected, feeling good enough. One of the #1 reasons why people come and see a therapist is they feel inadequate and they don't feel good enough. And they work and they work and they work and they work and they never feel good enough. They try real hard in relationships, they never feel good enough. And you know what it is for some people? I think of this metaphor. I talk to my clients about the fact that sometimes people have a heart that looks like a sieve. And you pour your love in and it leaks out. And they're insatiable. They need more love. Part of that comes from this early on distancing, pushing away, not pulling in. They don't feel good enough. And then the last piece is, how do you find sanctuary? Now, sanctuary is a concept that came out of Sandra Bloom's work. She's a psychiatrist out of I think Penn, it's a Philadelphia institution where she did her work. She's written a trilogy of books. One's called Creating Sanctuary. The second one is called Destroying Sanctuary. And the third one is called Restoring Sanctuary. And she has a couple of concepts that I'm just going to leave with you. You can write them down or not. I'm going to just leave these concepts with you because I think they're critically important to our understanding of each other. One concept is this, that in a school setting, the children can't be healthy unless the adults in the setting are healthy. Some of you are sitting there saying, I knew my kid's teacher was crazy. I knew that. It's not what I'm talking about because here's the back end of that. You can't raise healthy kids if you're not healthy. Unhealthy parents can't raise healthy kids. So what we need to do is we need to pay attention and do some self-care, which we'll talk about, so that we're the healthiest we can be. And the other thing that Sandra Bloom said, and it goes back to something that Steve said earlier about the school shooting most recently. Bloom says this, hurt people hurt people. Healthy people don't hurt people. Whether it's teasing and taunting, whether it's bullying, whether it's pushing and shoving, whether it's fighting, whether it's verbal, healthy people don't hurt people. Healthy people don't hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. I think we should pay attention to that. Not just for our kids, but in our relationships and our adult relationships. So it seems we never have enough time anymore, right? There's always so much more to do. Oh my God, my to-do list is bigger and bigger and bigger. It's always hurry, hurry, and hurry. But tonight should be different. We just kind of laid the groundwork for a conversation. So that I can annoy you and then calm you down. So that I can alienate you and pull you closer. Because that's the critically important piece. See, while I'm doing that, here's what I'm expecting you will do, because we're in the room here tonight. We're not out there, we're not taking care of the kids, we're here tonight. So what I'm expecting you to do is pay close attention to how my words and these ideas affect you. And whether or not you feel angered or frustrated, or whether or not it's like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Because the words and how they affect you will help you to determine what you need to do to make sure you raise up your children to be healthy. Here's some basic truths. These babies are our legacy. It is really important for us as moms and dads to know that our babies are okay. The second part is also true. At times, it is incredibly challenging to be a mom or a dad. And if you're a single mom or dad, it makes the challenge even bigger. Together we can find solutions to anything. People say to me sometimes, hey, listen, I'm looking for an answer. I said, don't ask me. I have no answers. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? You have no answers. I said, I have no answers. Because if I did, I'd write the book and sell you the book. You turn to page 35, there's the answer. Well, what good are you? I said, well, here's the difference. Together, we can create solutions for any problem. Together, moms and dads can create solutions to any problem. And then when they get stuck, they can reach out and pull in a third person or new ideas or new thinking. They can meet with the school counselor or the nurse or the administrator or the teacher. See, it's really, that's a simple way of taking a look at the fact that when our kids present challenge to us, we shouldn't run away from them because there are solutions to be created. And we can do that together. So, here's another concept for you. Most people think about it in terms of, oh man, hurry up, isn't it 9 o'clock yet? It's not about the time you spend here tonight. It's not it. It's the wrong concept. The concept is, you're spending your heartbeats tonight, and you have a finite number of heartbeats. You don't know when it's going to stop. So therefore, I have to work really hard to make sure that I hang something in the air of value so that you can grab it and take it home with you? I got to make sure you haven't wasted your heartbeats by being in the room because you heard somebody who's going to talk about raising healthy kids. This is really important stuff, folks. You and me together, this is really, really important stuff. And I want to make sure that we turn over as many stones tonight as we can. So let's begin here. You know, here's a concept that I haven't read about this, but it occurred to me one day that in the absence of understanding, when we don't understand, we either suffer and sometimes we die. Really? Well, yeah, how about this one? If you ingest lead, you will suffer, your brain will suffer, heavy metals in the body are not good, and sometimes you will die. And you might say, well, who's going to do that? Well, 100 years ago, lots of people. Because they didn't know about the effects of lead. When I was growing up, we had lead in our gasoline, there was lead in the paint. I grew up with that stuff. But as we get understanding, we say, well, that's bad for us. Let's change that because we want to survive. There's an example. Here's another example. Using tobacco. And those of you that are still smoking, that's on you. I'm not here to talk about your smoking. But what I'm here to talk about is, in the absence of understanding of what it does to our lungs, many, many, many people have died. And maybe some of your loved ones have died. And therefore, we can change our behavior if we understand the implications. And then there's another one. Asbestos. We didn't know that. Asbestos was everywhere. Asbestos was in all the public schools back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It was in all the boiler rooms. It was in the tile on the floor. And then what we realized, after many, many people died of mesothelioma, what we realized is, well, that's not good for us. We can't inhale that stuff. So therefore, rules were passed that we needed to get that out of the schools because we don't harm our kids. Third example, in the absence of understanding, we will either suffer or die. Then there's this one, excessive sugar in the diet, right? That's kind of been a more recent revelation. We all know because we follow the news about the effort in Philadelphia to ban sodas with sugar because of the issue of obesity and because of the issue of the fact that it creates problems physically with our bodies when we hold high levels of sugar that gives us energy boost and then fall off. It's not good for the organs in the body. In the absence of understanding, we suffer, we die. And then there's this. In the absence of understanding of the effects of traumatic events and absorbing toxic stress, you do, I do, our children suffer and die. Not stress, toxic stress. What are traumatic events we're going to talk about? They're things that sometimes we're just confronted with, and sometimes actually, honestly, sometimes we perpetrate them. Not intentionally. We never set out to harm our kids. Remember, we never want to screw over our kids. But sometimes our behavior as adults creates toxic environments for our children, and they either suffer and sometimes they die. So we're told what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Yeah, I kind of grew up with that. Yeah, that's wrong. Not how it works. Here's how it works. Cutting-edge research tells us that early chronic and unpredictable stressors shape our biology in ways that predetermine our adolescent and adult health. Early, chronic, and unpredictable. Those babies, the earlier chronic stress comes into their lives, the worse it does because their systems are not prepared to deal with it. So the earlier in a kid's life bad stuff happens, the worse it is. Chronic means if it happens once versus it happens regularly. If it's regularly, has a negative effect on the developing kid, the brain and the body. And the last one is unpredictable. If you know it's coming, you can prepare for it, but sometimes our children just get swiped away by this high stress and toxic events in the family. Early, chronic, unpredictable. They're like bombs that go off in the lives of our children. The more we can minimize that, the healthier our kids are. So the emotional health is critically important. I'll talk to you about the physical health. I don't go in great detail tonight about something called ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. That's for another presentation and another time and a deeper understanding. But what we know is, of these 10 things within the ACEs, if you get a score of 4 or more, it's significant on you physically. For instance, of these 10 prompts, if you have 4 or more, you have a 200% increase in heart disease, diabetes, immune deficiencies. That when we live with toxic stress, there's only a certain amount of time that our body can handle it. Emotional health affects our kids in the classroom. Kids want to do well. They want to please you. They want to please teachers. They don't screw it up just to irritate you, although you believe that. You're doing this to punish me, aren't you? You're just doing this to frustrate me, aren't you? Nope. It's not why they're doing it. They want to be successful. You know why? Because they want that approval in your face. They want that teacher to say, good job. You're really working well. You do well in teams. That's what kids want to hear. So they're not going to sabotage themselves so that they get your yucky face. They don't want that. Some of you are still giving me your yucky face tonight. I'm working real hard here. Emotional health is prerequisite to relationships. Kids who live with high toxic stress don't do relationships well. And when you don't do relationships well, you don't do friends well, you don't do adults well, you're not in good, long, healthy, lasting relationships, and you don't do well in employment. You just don't. You can fight that if you want. You can say, hey, listen, George, let me tell you what my zip code is. This is irrespective of your zip code. I don't care where your kid goes to school. I don't care who you are. I don't care your pedigree. I don't care how much money you make. None of that is relevant when it comes to the well-being of our children. Oh, yes, of course, it creates environments that can support that, but the basic needs of kids is their emotional health is a prerequisite to success in the classroom, in relationships, throughout their entire lives. I promote this book because I love this book. It's called Childhood Disrupted. It's by Donna Jackson Nakasawa. It's an easy read. I always have mine with me in case I'm stuck in a diner or something. This is the dog-eared book. She didn't start out as a researcher. She started out to figure out why her health was so poor and what she could do about it. And that translated into Childhood Disrupted. Here's the byline: how your biography becomes your biology. How you live and where you live and who you are affects your biology, which ultimately affects your brain and your well-being or your unwell-being. Easy read. I've never met her, but I want to because she owes me. I promote her book every day. She probably is selling books because of this guy here in New Jersey. Any of these behaviors familiar? Now we're going to start talking about how it plays out. Irritability, anger, hostility. I'm going to say self-injury, sensitivity to rejection, complaints of physical illness, absences and tardy for school or work, decreases in school work performance, high toxic stress in that boy, in that girl. You cannot be healthy and have those behaviors. Those behaviors say there's something else going on. Let's look behind the behaviors and see how we can change something for our kids. Although there are some women in the audience that elbow their husbands and say, hey, that's you. It's not our kids. That irritability, that's you. That was a joke. Come on. Lighten up a little bit. And how about this? Temper outbursts, bullying, intimidating, aggression, isolation, use of drugs and alcohol. Those behaviors do not come to us accidentally. They are drawn to us and we are vulnerable to them based upon how our system works. There's some real good, not only logic, great science behind it. This is no more junk science. This is real genetic, epigenetic, the effects of toxic stress on human beings, including you. I don't want you to disclose and raise your hand. But one of the things that we do know, for instance, let's talk about you for a minute. That if you carry high stress all the time, then you're probably more likely than not to be a headache person. But your head is always hurting. Now you can call it migraines if you want, but this is a stress area. The other place is in the gut. The gut's a stress area. Belly aches, constipation, diarrhea, nausea, poor appetite, maybe even vomiting. And when the doctor looks and tests, there's nothing they can find wrong because the atmosphere it lands right here in the gut. Now, how do I know that's true? I got some real good research on this. I watch TV. So do you. What are all the commercials about anymore? They're all about gut medication. I mean, I'm not going to ask if you take Linzess, but I'm going to tell you it's promoted on TV a lot in real fancy marketing ways. And what I'm suggesting is that if we take a look at some of the other things that your body is holding on to, your body may be able to calm down if there are some ways you can dissipate the stressors. These are red flags. Here they are. Let's talk about self-injury. Self-injury scares parents. If you discover that your kid is cutting herself, your first response is an anger response because you're so scared, and that response is not helpful. That behavior is not a voluntary behavior. They're looking at ways to kind of calm the body. Kids will tell you they'd rather the physical pain than the emotional pain or the emptiness. The blood makes me sick. When I see the blood, I feel alive. And if we can figure out other ways for kids to deal with their stressors, the self-injury goes away. For our boys, and this is kind of a heads up for you guys, girls typically will use blades or burning. Boys and girls will bang their heads and sit against the wall and bang their head. Does the whole same thing about calming. Here's the one that gets by us sometimes. It's when our boys, usually adolescents, punch walls in their, either in the den or in the garage or in their bedroom. That's not what I would call typical behavior. I call that high stress behavior, and the pain caused by that is the same physical reaction as cutting your arm. So if there are holes in your boy's wall, don't walk past his room this way, sit down and say, hey George, listen, I'm really concerned about you. This guy was talking about this the other day. I think you're under a lot of stress. Open up the conversation. Self-injury is a red flag that says, pay attention. Pay attention. Yeah, right? You love that, right? We want our kids to be that. I'll sign up for 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 that. But there are other kids, right? Just the sadness. Now let me make another clarification here. This is where the culture has influenced you poorly. We are real comfortable with using the word depressed. We use it all the time. Oh, can't believe it. I was in this store yesterday. Those shoes were on sale. I'm depressed. I got an A- instead of an A. I'm depressed. She broke up with me. I'm depressed. As opposed to, I am really sad. Because that's different. So we need to be really careful about using that word so easily. And we use the word depression and anxiety much too easily. And here's a downside of this. Because you live in this wonderful country, if you complain about anxiety and depression, somebody's going to put you on medication because that's what we do. As opposed to wondering whether or not there's something in the environment that affects us, that makes us anxious or deeply sad. Yeah, how about that little face? She's not even sure what to do with the circumstances, right? God, I hope that's not a picture of one of your daughters. I pulled that off the internet. Or this one. How about this little one? That's a fear response, right? That's a startle, scare response. That little one saw the bear in some form. But this one, not knowing what to do with the anger that we have. Or this one, overwhelmed. He's just trying to figure it out. And he's got mom and dad behind him, but they're really not behind him, right? They're just battling back and forth on what to do. You know, we look at this sign here, this. There are several pictures that I came across. That's almost like he's trying to hold his head on. Feels like his head's going to explode. He doesn't know what to do. He's just filled with frustration. This is an opportunity for mom and dad to kind of join with him and attach with him and say, okay, can we figure this out? There's got to be a solution, right? Maybe I can call school tomorrow or something. Overwhelmed by relationships at home and at school. So, let's go down the list of the kids that I'm talking about, because the opposite of that is your babies, your healthy kids. So it's this. Why do so many of our kids wind up here, drinking and drugging to numb the pain? You've wondered that, right? The important concept there is to numb the pain. That's usually an emotional pain. They don't like to be present. They like to be out of their body. Supposed to be present. That could be these guys. You know, I've been in education long enough, and I think it's relevant here, I've been in education long enough that when I started in the 70s, what we used to see in high school, we now see in middle school. And what we used to see in middle school, we now see in elementary school. It's the wrong trajectory for our boys and girls. And not only can we get frightened, they get frightened. So we don't want to normalize that behavior. We want to understand it, but we don't want to normalize it. And this is another one here. What about this cutting and burning? We talked about that, right? So you can see that belly. Nobody's going to see that belly. She's going to cover that belly up. But that belly is a roadmap of her pain and her hurt that she doesn't know how to remedy it. Because if she says, I'm doing this, what's her fear? Judgment. She's going to be disciplined, punished. And what she needs is understanding. Because that's the way she's figured out how to calm her body. Failing, and in spite of immense potential. Sat in too many 504 plan meetings, if some of you know there, or IP meetings, or just with parents and teachers. And teachers, you know, have a great deal of pride in wanting to be able, they'll take on any challenge. They want to prove they're master educators. But so many times they'll sit there and they'll say, I can't figure it out. Amazingly smart. Can't get the performance going. See, that's this little guy here. See him holding on to his head? Let me give you a hypothetical on that, because it may apply to some of your kids. The hypothetical is this. His memory comes and goes. Some days he remembers it, some days he doesn't. And it seems that he can come to you and he can do his times tables. But the next day in school, when the teacher says, hey, give me your times tables, blank. Does that mean it all leaked out? No, what it means is this high stressors and high anxiety that he carries. Here's what goes on in your brain. This goes on in your brain. And if you'd like to take me on about this, that's fine, because I'm real comfortable saying this. The higher the stress level in our body, the more the prefrontal cortex stops operating. It shuts down. This is the thinking. This is the executive functioning. This is the part that problem solves. When you're under high stress, it stops working. Let me give you an example, because I know some of you have these doubtful faces. Like, oh, come on, move on, that's not true. Imagine you. And let's imagine that tomorrow morning, you have been told today that tomorrow morning you have to come in early and meet with the boss because you're going to do evaluation, your evaluation. Now you feel pretty confident, but you know these bosses. So you want to make sure you get a good night's sleep, right? So you put everybody in your house on alert. Say, listen, I'm not messing around with you guys tonight or tomorrow morning because I'm going to be in early because I'm meeting with my boss. And you forget to set the alarm. So you get up 15 minutes late, 20 minutes, no big deal, right? Big deal to you. You go flying through the house. If there's somebody in the shower, get out. Because you got to get your shower. You got to get yourself ready. And you yell at everybody, hey, listen, I'm going. And you leave the house. And you're back in 30 seconds, and what you say is, come on, somebody must have moved my keys. Where are my keys? I don't see my keys. My keys are somewhere. And your kid looks at you and says, Mom, Dad, they're in your hand. Oh. And you go back out. You're back in 30 seconds later. All right, one more thing. I need to have my glasses, because if I don't have my glasses, I can't read anything. They're in your head. Now, that otherwise competent mom or dad who couldn't remember they had the keys and couldn't remember they had the glasses with them, that was only high stress. They didn't start with dementia. They lost it because of high stress, and when you're high stress, you operate on automatic systems, not cognitive systems. That happens to our children in the classroom frequently. How about this? Isolating and avoiding, we've talked about that, right? More of holding onto his head. Inflicting harm on others. What about that? What about the taunting and teasing? What about the online and in-person? What we would call bullying. What about that? Hurts people, hurt people. That it can get to the part of being physical and fighting. That taken to its extreme is somebody that goes to a school with a gun and kills people. Because hurt people, hurt people. And we don't want to think that, and I don't want to think that either, but we know it's true. But isn't there a road to that? How is it that we can raise up our children so that they don't feel the need for retribution and harm and hate? Wanting and trying to end their life. Kids, that was the 13-year-old, right? When I started, remember I told you about the idea that my life changed direction and got me here tonight? What changed direction is I couldn't leave behind that question. How's that even possible? How's it possible our kids drink and drug? How's it possible that kids hurt other kids? How's it possible that they cut themselves? How's it possible that they want to die? How's that possible? Not with who we are, not with where we live, not with what we have. How's that possible? And why do they research how to die? And then what about those kids who do die? When I saw that in the research, that pulled me in to say, hey, there's a message here, George. You need to take this message to educators. You need to take it to parents. You need to let them know what the science says, because left talked about and unsaid, our kids are all, some of our kids, not all, some of our kids are going over the cliff. Of all the kids we're talking about the 15 or 20% that are really, really, really suffering. Some you know about and some you don't. Dying, 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 dying. I'm going to do this one slide for you on suicide. I want you to understand this. I want to take the scare out of this. It's a tragedy beyond tragedies. When I sit with moms and dads who have lost a child to suicide, there is no explaining it. I can say to them, hey, listen, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I can tell you right now, of the 50 states in the country, New Jersey's number 49. We're doing really well in suicide prevention. I can say to them, hey, listen, every year we got our numbers down. There's only 75 or 80 kids in New Jersey between the ages of 10 and 24 that take their own life. Isn't that good news? And Mr. and Mrs. Jones said, my kid died. Don't confuse me with that information. My heart's broken. So let's understand it, right? Because if you understand it and you know what you're looking for, then you can say, wow, I'm really scared. Let me call the school counselor. Let me talk to the nurse, the SAC. You should know who your resources are in this wonderful school system. Or if you're here in a charter school, you should know where the resources are and where are the community resources. Because we have to do this together. We have to do this connection together. Suicide deaths, both kids and adults. Both kids and adults always begin with an underlying vulnerability. Because healthy people do not take their own lives. We're hardwired to live. We're survivors. There's always an underlying vulnerability. In this day and age, we call them by names in the DSM-5, right? We call them names like mood disorders and bipolar disorder and depression, anxiety. Yeah, I understand that. That doesn't impress me. What impresses me is the fact that there is a quiet, subtle, beneath the surface suffering. And we have to be more attentive to understand it. But being vulnerable, having an underlying vulnerability, is not it. That doesn't result in a suicide death. Because there has to be something else, and that something else is called a stress event. We all have vulnerabilities. Most of us know where they are, and we avoid stuff that makes us feel more vulnerable. But then there are these stress events that are unpredictable. These are things that just happen in our family. For our kids, a stress event could be a breakup. A romantic relationship, that's a high stress event. Getting a bad grade, high stress event. Getting a ticket, having to go to court, high stress event. Getting suspended from school, high stress event. These are things that happen, right? But when you're vulnerable and they happen, when you have an underlying fragileness to you and they happen, what happens then is there is an acute mood change. The shift happens rather immediately. And then we have to look for those behaviors. What are those behaviors? Those behaviors are like, they may start smoking more weed, right? Because when you're feeling terrible, you don't want to feel terrible, so you'll do things. They may self-injure more, they may smoke more weed or drink more alcohol. They might bang their head more. Fight, flight comes in, they may leave the house. It's an acute mood change. And then they can go either way. And part of bringing this up tonight, right in the middle of this conversation with you, is because it can go either way, and we can be on the saving side of that. Here's the saving side. If in fact something inhibits this, you see it, you intervene, you hold them on, you call 911, you call a mobile response, you talk to the school counselor, you put away your embarrassment of what you're struggling, your kid is going through, you set it aside and say, but I got to save my kid's life. And that slows the whole process down, and when you do that, when somebody connects with that kid, then you have survival. Just like when you saw the bear, when the acute mood change happens, the whole body system comes up here. This part can't think, it's not problem solving, it's not figuring it out, it's not thinking how much they love you, it's not thinking what they can do to solve the problem. And we're going to teach you what you can do to help your kids in that moment. But if there can be an intervention, and let me tell you, I'll give you an example. Many times, our girls who are suffering, they will use pills to die. And then usually, because our girls who are they are, they tell somebody. They come down the steps and they yell at their mom and say, it's your fault that I'm going to die. But it gives the mom an opportunity to say, what are you talking about? And get that kid the kind of intervention help. Or they'll Snapchat somebody, or they'll send a picture to somebody, or they'll text somebody. And they'll say, hey, I know we're best friends, but I can't do this anymore. What are you talking about? There was a 12-year-old girl when I was in Monmouth County. She sent pictures that she had a handful of pills to her friends. You know what her friends did? The friends happened, and I don't know how this works, they had the mom's cell phone number in their phone. They called mom, and they said, hey, listen, here are the pictures. She's upstairs in your house. Please do something. Mom went up and saved that kid's life. Because with pills, you have a little bit of a window to intervene. So keep this in mind if you have one of those adolescents at home that is suffering. Many times our kids are making visits to Grandma and Grandpa's house now. You know why that is, right? Grandma and Grandpa have lots of medication. And if they take just one and they stockpile it, and take just one and stockpile it, and Grandma says, how come I only have 15 pills? So Grandma, you don't remember. Of course you only have 15. So it's access. And what we need to do is intervene and reduce the access to needs like pills. Because if somebody intervenes over here, if you know what's going on, if you trust your instincts, if you talk to the school counselors, if you talk to your pediatrician, it inhibits this out of control and it's survival. Now, on the other side, the opposite is true, however, right? If on this side, the acute mood change means that there's a weapon available, a gun, rope, pills, the closer they are to means, higher risk. If nobody intervenes because nobody knows, higher risk. And when there's higher risk, and they're agitated, and they isolate, that's where suicide's come from. We talk about this openly for this reason. Talking about suicide death reduces risk. Me talking about it to you, putting some understanding behind it, reduces risk, elevates understanding. If you're really worried about your kid, you say, hey, listen, George, I'm really concerned about you. I got a call from one of your friends, they're concerned about you because you're not hanging out as much, and I noticed that, I don't approve of marijuana, but I know you've been using more and more marijuana. I'm really scared, George, and I want to know, are you thinking about dying? Boy, what a courageous mom or dad. But when you ask the question, you reduce risk. If you remain silent, it increases risk. The reason that suicidal people don't talk about it is because in our culture, it's shameful. And they will be judged. And they're afraid they're going to be hospitalized. So therefore, we have to set that aside because we love our kids. To be able to say, I'm worried about you. Are you thinking about taking your own life? Here are the events I'm talking about. Remember we talked about toxic stress and the events? Here they are. And I've got some news for you, in case you're unaware of this. This stuff happens in Princeton. You know that, right? This is where I step on your toes, right? This is not over there. These are in our communities, in our homes. And I'm not making judgment here. I just want to understand that sometimes the nest is not a healthy place for kids. And it doesn't mean you should burn the nest and get rid of the big birds. What it means is there a way in which we can help that mom and that dad to change the culture, the tone, the toxicity of the nest? Because when we can do that, we lower risk. These are the things that go on. Now, I'm going to point to a couple that might surprise you. Remember I was talking about ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experience? 10 prompts? Well, the researchers, when they did the research, they found that the response on the 10 were all about an equal response except for one. But had a bit of a higher response, and it's this: harsh and demeaning language, chronic humiliation. When kids are humiliated by the language that the adults tell them, it raises their risk. It destroys the sense of self, puts them at greater risk of something. Your language. Let me pick on you a little bit more. Certainly nobody in the room would call their kids stupid. But that explodes in their face. But I'll tell you what a lot of us do call our kids, and it's just as destructive. We call them lazy. The kids really like to achieve. There are other things behind the issue of lack of motivation. We call our kids on their lies and call them liars. You lied to me. Well, anybody would lie to you to avoid being in trouble. So how do you create an environment in which there's a greater likelihood of truthfulness and help-seeking, as opposed to hiding, getting caught, and being called a liar? Harsh and demeaning language. Check it on yourself. It creates a toxic environment in the nest. That's number one of all of them. The rest of them certainly have their negative effect on our children. Hey, how about this? This is the research that says if your kid is under high toxic stress, look at some of the behaviors. Wow. If there are any teachers in the room, you know the kids in your classroom can't do well if this is their behavior. You expect presence, you expect focus, retention, memory. You expect all that. High toxic stress kids can't do that. This part of the brain goes offline. They're looking for the dangers. They don't feel that they can be successful. So that's a really important thing. Here's the next important thing. This usually gets me in trouble. And if there are any physicians in the room, I'm probably in trouble with you, and I'm okay with that. This kid is sent to the pediatrician or the PCP, the primary care physician, or the psychiatrist, and somebody's going to look in the book and call him ADHD. That's bad enough to tell your kid you have a disorder. I think what's worse is we automatically go to medication. It's who we are. Do you realize there are only 2 countries in the world that advertise medications directly to the public? Finland and us. Because in all the other countries, they kind of protect and say, hey, listen, that's the purview of the doctor. You explain what you got. Now here's what we do. Hey, listen, doc, I am not feeling well. I got these behaviors and my kid needs Concerta. I just know it. I was on the internet and I know it. And the internet doesn't lie. So what I'm here to say to you is, it's not a jump to. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some conditions, and even with my clients in the office, there are some times that I believe that the doctor needs to do a really good job of prescribing a medication to allow some healing to happen. Medication usually doesn't do healing. It does symptom reduction. But I'm looking for healing change. I'm looking for the system to be different so they don't rely on that. So what's the secret? How do our kids get to be the best they can be? What can we do? This is Maslow's hierarchy. Some of you have been to school, been to graduate school, somehow this come across you. Abraham Maslow figured it out. See, up here, this self-actualization, this is where all of you and all of your teachers want your kids to operate. Be the best of who they can be. I do too. Hey, if I get a vote in your kid, I'm voting for your kid to be at the top of that. But in order to get there, they got to go through all of these other levels. These other things have to be in place for the brain to be fully functioning and do the best they can do in terms of the academic standards that we expect. So, this is an easy one, right? Your kids need biological and physiological needs met. They need food and shelter. All right, got that. Check that box off. However, 30 years ago, we didn't know that science. And it was 30 years ago we started feeding kids free and reduced lunch and breakfast. You know why we did that? Not because we felt bad for those kids. Because if their bellies don't have food in them, then everything else doesn't work. So we've got to have kids, including you. Oh, by the way, a Coke and a bag of chips on the way to school ain't it. I know that may be what your adolescent wants, but that's not it. That's not the nutrition that's going to balance out the sugar levels in their system to be fully prepared to engage in school. So they have to have their biological needs met. Oh, this over here, I put this in here because this is about time of the evening where people start to doze off. Sex. Yes, you do need to have sex. No hands. Don't go looking at your spouse. I don't want to know anything about your private lives. It's a part of being the normal, healthy adolescent. Adult. But then, it's got to be this one, safety. Kids have to feel safe. They got to feel safe emotionally and physically. See what it looks like. They have to feel protected, secure. There's order and predictability. There's structure and predictability, both at home and in school. Schools are wonderful at that. Like, can you imagine if you had to respond, let's say you're not in education, you're not an educator, you do some other wonderful work in the world. Can you imagine if somebody said to you, hey, listen, tomorrow I'm going to send 1,200 kids to this building. I want you to get them there. I want you to get them in the right spot, feed them, take care of their health needs if they need it. Oh, if they're having a bad day, make sure you have counselors available, and make sure they're safe going home. That's what schools do. They're amazing organizations. I know, you only see it from the lens of your kid. They're all the kids. So therefore, safety, order, limits, stability, predictability, structure, rules, schedules, really important. Let me make this point. This is for those of you that have either juniors or seniors in high school, or maybe you've been struggling with your freshman in college. This is something else that we don't usually pay much attention to. For 13 years, imagine this, for 13 years, your kid is plugged into a system that has all of those things. And safety nets. And people know them, and people smile at them, and people have had their brothers and sisters before. And the kids seem to be really doing okay. But for some of our kids, when they graduate and go off to university, the safety net gets ripped away. They got to create their own safety net. Nobody knows them. Nobody cares if they're in class. Nobody necessarily gives them a smile. Most kids can go off to university and do that. Some of our kids, that's where their anxiety shoots through the roof. That's where they start drinking, binge drinking a lot. That's where they smoke a lot of weed. Because they got to calm this. And you know why? In high school, they were the high flyers. Now, they're in a school with all high flyers. It's just a different environment. We have to consider the fact that those transitions for some of our kids are really, really, really difficult. Because of the sense of safety, and then this one, belonging. If those early pictures of those babies being held and those smiles, that's this. That's belonging and love needs. Family, affection, relationships, work group. In the absence of that, you can't be a high flyer. It's developmental. And you'll notice the next one is what some of you worry about. You will say to me as a therapist, you'll say to the school counselor, say to the principal, say to the teacher, you know, I'm just worried about George. He doesn't have good self-esteem. Could you teach him that? No. It's not cerebral. Self-esteem comes after all of these prerequisites. It's feeling good about yourself because you know how to navigate. It's you know how to seek help when you need it. It's because your body stays calm enough that everything operates optimally. Out of all of those things, these first three, that's where self-esteem comes from. So we need to rethink what we're doing at home and what we're doing in school and how that works. What can get in the way? Living in a chaotic family can get in the way. Not your family, the neighbor. If you have a chaotic family, it works against you as a mom and dad. If you are not having at least one meal together, where everybody's around the table, at least once a week, you're working against yourself. What we know is the more the family is together around meals, it lowers risky behavior. It lowers drug alcohol behavior. It increases achievement in school. What's that have to do with it? It's connectedness and attachment, and connectedness and attachment. And I know what happens. So I'm not pointing fingers, but I know what happens. Especially if you have more than one kid. You got kids flying in different directions. They're going to sports things. They're up in their room on their computer. It's everywhere. It's scattered. Bring them together, huddle them together. At least one time a week. At least once. Chaotic family. All these things we've already talked about. These were on the risk factor list. Here are the antidotes. You get high stress, the more of this stuff you have in your life, the more your body feels better. Movement means regular exercise, walking, swimming, biking. Get rid of the, I haven't used this word yet, cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Burn it up. Drink lots of water. Hydration is up there, right there. Hydration means the more water you drink, you get rid of it, you flush it out, you recalibrate the body. There's connection and conversation. Some parents mostly spend their time in giving directives. Do this, stop doing that. There's very little reciprocity, there's very little reciprocal conversation. Oh, I know, you're saying, wait, you don't know my kid. When I say to my kid, hey, how was school? The kid says, okay. And that's the end of the conversation. And I wouldn't want you to put a lamp on them and interrogate them. That's not good, right? But can you figure out ways in which you share something to find out something, and you get this little conversation going? And do you know where that happens? At the dinner table. And if your kids won't talk, you talk. Share your day. Share something funny that happened. Show them what that's like. Digestion will be better. Some of you have kids that are eating standing up. Or you're in the dining room and they're at the kitchen counter. Hey, I know, I hear it. I hear it from families all the time. Huddle them together. If you really want to freak them out, put a candle on the table and give them cloth napkins. That will freak them out. And that's not a bad thing to do. It kind of keeps your kids off balance. I like that. Sleep. Steve mentioned this right out of the gate. Across the country, adults and kids, sleep disruption. Sleep disruption can't help you process what you experience during the day, doesn't recalibrate your body, doesn't soothe and heal. If your kids have convinced you that they need to have their devices with them because they need to check throughout the night, that's nonsense. You can, in fact, say, hey, listen, we're thinking about a new rule here in the family. All devices on the kitchen, plug them in there. However, you have to do the same thing. Let me tell you a story about a young lady that was in my office. I haven't seen her in a while because she's off to college now. And I was trying to help Mom and this kid kind of reconnect. And Mom got to the point where she said to her, you know you can always come and talk to me. And I don't understand why you tell George that that's not happening. She said, that's not true. She said, it is true. You can come to me anytime. And her kid said this, every time I come to you, and I'm in the midst of a conversation, you'll get a phone call and you'll do this, and you leave me standing there, disconnected. Or you will say to me, hey, listen, I need to really, this is a very important phone call. And I said to the kid, so more important than you? She said, it feels that way. What are their priorities? What are your priorities for your babies? They need stuff from you that they can't get from anybody else. You can't replicate it. You're the mom. You're the dad. We're going to figure out how to fix that in just a bit. Safety for our kids means creating safe classrooms, safe emotionally. I'm really big on that when I work with school districts and teachers. How do we create sanctuary classrooms where regardless of how well these kids do, regardless of who they are, regardless of their name or where they're from and how they look, they feel safe in the classroom? That's really important. A sanctuary classroom, a sanctuary school, a sanctuary community that includes sanctuary homes. Nurturing, avoiding shame and embarrassment. That's the chronic humiliation. Let me poll the group because I'm losing you here, so I want to get a little bit of audience participation. Listen, I'm looking for somebody to volunteer. Could you tell the rest of us the most shameful thing you've ever done? Anybody? Why would you do that? Say, no, not doing that. Because shame is held down here, and the interesting thing about shame is we have to get through shame to get to depression. Because some kids are so covered over, encapsulated with the shame of who they are, how they are, what they've done, what they haven't done. A disappointment to you is really difficult, but possible, to get to the heart of who they are. Because shame and embarrassment. Let's avoid shaming our kids. Let's avoid talking to them in the car, berating them in the car when their friends are there. Kids will tell you it's humiliating. Kids will tell you I'm just trying to do my best. Sometimes I'm not even sure what that is, but I would really like to get my mom and dad's approval. They're looking for your approval. Oh, while I'm here, let me tell you this. The word discipline does not mean punishment. Discipline, actually, if you take the root word back, it means to make a disciple of. That means to live your life in a way that your kids want to live their life that way. That your guidance, let me tell you where the guidance comes from. When I grew up, there was a spare the rod school of the child, remember that? Which means that you should spank your kid whenever you want. Well, that's not what it meant. That actually is a biblical origin, and what it means is shepherds used to have two tools, a crook and a rod. The crook was to reach down in the ravine and pull the sheep up when they would fall off the trail. And the rod was simply to guide them, not beat them, so that they didn't fall into the ravine to begin with. So therefore, what it means is, how do I live my life in a way? How do I stay connected to my kids in a way? How do I have open conversations? How can I be honest? How can I tell them that I don't know the answer to that, but I'm willing to find out? How can I stay engaged with my kids where I don't need punishment? But to follow, because the discipline is, I want to be like my mom. Regardless of the age of your kids tonight, never give up. Always believe change is possible. That's an always, always, always. That just never changes. Really, George, my kid's 23-year-old. He's a mess. He lives in the basement. It's okay. We can figure this out. Solutions, we can figure this out. Oh, and I didn't make that story up because there are a lot of 23-year-olds who come home from college who live in the basement of the parents' house. Stop funding them. I said to my 23-year-olds, what a gig you got. You don't have to do anything. Your parents buy you what they put gas in the car and buy you shorts and all that. Man, that's a really good gig. But the kids realize after a while, like it's a pretty low life. They're in the basement. It's a pretty low life. Don't fund them. Don't do that. Children who are more resilient after facing adversity have an important, reliable adult. They don't need you. Your children don't need you. They need one significant adult that they can trust. And if it's you, golden, that's great. One significant adult. My mom and dad had pretty messy growing up years. Like my mom had been abandoned by her mom when my mom was 5. My dad kind of grew up on the streets of Trenton, slept in cars. They didn't have good beginnings, right? So I didn't know any of this stuff when I was growing up. It's kind of like my dad never played ball with me. He always worked. That's what he did. He was up before I got up, and he came home late. And my mom, took care of the kids. And I kind of wondered how I came to be pretty healthy, because they couldn't give me all this stuff. They didn't know how. They didn't have the experience. I didn't realize until about 2 months ago that it was my grandfather. He lived in the house. In my grandfather's eyes, I didn't do no wrong. No wrong. He would take me to the beach. He ran a bakery. He would take me on the bakery truck to deliver baked goods. I always felt safe with my grandfather. One significant trusted adult. A coach, a teacher, a grandparent, a faith leader, somebody. With that direction, kids get healed. This is from Don's book. That's that Childhood Disrupted I talked about. Perfect parenting. All right, here we come. This is where I lean on you guys. So this is Dan Siegel's work. No such thing. It's in the moment. You're creating it as you go along. I say to parents all the time, say, hey, listen, you've got 3 kids. The oldest is 13. Before now, how many 13-year-olds did you raise? Well, none. He's my first. Exactly. Exactly right. You're learning as you go along. To continually blame yourself, put yourself down, gives your kids a parent who doesn't believe in himself or herself. You guys are awesome parents. Oh, you like to have made mistakes? Talk to my 2 girls. They'll tell you about mistakes. But we hang in there and we do it and we stay connected and we try and we listen and we read and we work with other people. It's never too late to make changes. So, let's do this. What's a parent to do? Here are 10 things a parent can do. That's right, you better get your pencils out. Number 1, manage your own stuff. Clinically, that's called crap. You got to manage your own crap. You can't dump your stuff on them. It's your stuff. Heal your stuff. Make sense out of your own story. And when you can make sense out of your own story, all of a sudden, your story doesn't get in the way of you being a mom and a dad. Manage your own baggage. Number 2, understand that childhood's chronic challenges are different than stresses. Here's where I lean on you again. There was a time, not very many years ago, where in this country was created a phenomenon called a helicopter parent. They don't exist anymore. Now we have snowplow parents. They eliminate every hurdle that gets in the way of their child. They will not allow their child to fall and bruise a knee. They only want them to be happy. When my daughter was 5, I had a knock on the door, and it was a guy from the soccer league. He said, hey, my name is Don. I said, hi, my name is George. He said, I understand that you signed your daughter Megan up for soccer. I said, yeah, we did. It's going to be our first experience. It's going to be really, really terrific. He said, hey, listen, we'd like you to be a coach. I said, no, you don't understand. I don't know anything about soccer. He said, well, I kind of figured that out, but see all these videotapes that I have? Take these videotapes and watch them. You can be one of our coaches. I said, oh, I don't think this is going to work out. He turns and walks away. I walked back in the house. My wife says, who was that? I said, that was Don. And she said, what were you talking about? I said, hey, I'm a coach. She said, you don't know anything about soccer. I said, I know, but I have videotapes. 5 years later, I was president of the girls' soccer league. Part of the responsibility of the president of the girls' soccer league is every fall, at the end of every fall season, we have a pizza party. I don't know that you have it here where I live. You go to the local firehouse and you have pizza and ice cream, and that's it. It's a cheap night. All the kids come, they dress in uniforms, and they can't wait to get their trophy. And every year, one of my responsibilities at the end of the night is to stand by the doorway and thank them for the season and say, don't forget to register next year. That was my job. They didn't trust me to do anything else because I didn't know anything about soccer. One year I was standing the back doors of the firehouse, West Trenton Firehouse, and as the parents were coming out, down the center aisle comes this mom and dad, this little girl. She was about 7, and she was bawling her eyes out. I thought, oh man, this isn't good. And they got closer and closer, and I didn't know, am I supposed to say something? This is probably not appropriate to say, hey, good season, see you next year. And as they got close to me, I watched that dad, and then I heard him bend down to that girl and said, it's okay, sweetie, I'll buy you a trophy. That's a snowplow parent. To be able to tolerate not having a winning season develops resiliency. To be able to problem solve and figure something out and not be told the answer all the time. That builds resiliency. To be able to say to kids, hey, listen, I'm just a resource. I'm not going to do your homework with you. I'm going to be over here. If you stumble on a problem, I'm over here. Maybe I'll even be able to help you. Ask me, and I'll be happy to do that. That builds resiliency. Parents will go online to look for every assignment that's not handed in or every test grade so that they can dump on their kid and snap the whip behind their kid to get them going. Doesn't develop resiliency. It's a balance. Don't get me wrong. It's a balance. But snowplow parents don't ever want their kids to feel bad. I taught for a while at the College of New Jersey. I loved to be there in the fall when it was freshman year. So I would go on campus, this is August, and I'd go over to where the student center was, and right over there is Green Hall, and that's where the administrative offices is. And there'd be this long line in Green Hall because they're doing parking passes, and they're doing bills, and they're doing all that stuff. And when I looked in that long line, they were all the parents. Where were their kids? At the student center, having a good time. These kids were 18, 19 years old. They could easily have stood in line and figured that out. Build resiliency. Those things are not what we're talking about, toxic stressors. We're talking about opportunities to face a challenge, to develop the stress tolerance, to problem solve, and to use you as a resource. Understand that chronic challenges are different than stresses. Offer FaceTime with your child without a yuck face. I've said that 3 times because it's a really important thing. I must comment, however, all of you have pretty much relaxed your faces. There are no yucks left in the room. Soothing eye gaze, not a death stare. Soothing eye gaze. I'm your mom. I love you. I just want to have this conversation. As opposed to empty your pockets. Soothing eye gaze. If you lose your temper, apologize right away. Come back and apologize. That's discipline, and that's modeling the disciple. The disciple says, if I screw up, I own it, I apologize, and I make amends. Because when you do that, they do that. If you're going to take the position, I don't have to do that. I'm the adult. Okay, you're right. Knock yourself out. Are you pleased with the attitudes you're developing in your children? If not, show them that humbleness of apologizing. Validate and normalize their emotions. You don't have to condone their behavior, but validate their anger as their anger. They're allowed to be angry. Hey, don't be angry. That's what I feel. Try to understand it. So what you're validating is the fact that you have a range of human emotions. You don't have to condone the behavior because they punch a hole in the wall. You don't have to condone it. You just have to understand it. Strengthen the attachments, even now. A hug, a touch. Be in the room with them. You know, those of you that do still prepare meals, that's a way of putting your love into your children and your family, right? You put it into the food, and they nourish it. And if you're sitting down at the table, it's even better. If you're all together, it's even better. Amplify the good feelings. Don't let that slide. If you're a kind of adult that holds a grudge, get over yourself. Manage your own baggage on that. Because you're missing heartbeats with that kid. You're missing opportunities to help to nurture who they are by keeping them closer. There's the 20-second hug. Not 25, remember that. Bless you. I'm going to jump right to number 10, mindfulness. Mindfulness used to be poo-pooed by the sciences as being that's what they do over there. We don't do this here. How shameful that is for us to have that attitude. Because what we found with meditation and mindfulness is a clear scientific way to heal the body, to calm the body. We're teaching this in schools now, where classrooms are beginning for 5 minutes to do a little bit of circle time, deep breathing, and a little bit of concentration. And when the teacher forgets to do it, the kids say, hey, can we do that circle deep breathing thing? Because it appeals to them naturally. And guess what happens? This is why administrators love it. Guess what?